Hello, good evening. It's very nice to see you all. I should begin by saying I've already broken my father's first and only rule about wearing the kilt, which is you can wear it on any occasion, anywhere, in any weather, except if you're sitting on a stage. So if there's anybody over here of a nervous disposition who would like to move, there's plenty of other seats. Let's hope that nothing goes wrong. This is indeed a different in conversation because our guest is the new or newish Vice-Chancellor. Still new. Karen Cox. And it's an opportunity for Karen to tell us a bit about her background, to explain something of her vision about the university, and to take some questions on anything that seems to be relevant to you and to us. One theme in our conversation will be how education transforms lives, because it's transformed both our lives in different ways. And that's where I wanted to start, Karen, which is, tell us a little bit about your background, because you are what is called in the trade non-traditional university family.
Well, first of all, before I answer that question, can I just say thank you very much for the very, very warm welcome that I've received at the university, and also the broader city of Canterbury and the county of Kent. So I wanted to say that first of all. Also, I hope things go well tonight, because I think I'm still on probation. So I feel a little bit like I'm having a second interview, but hopefully we'll be fine. So yes, I suppose you would describe me as a non-traditional university, originally applicant, and then somebody who very, very much benefited from the opportunity to go to university. So I grew up in a town called Pudsey. Many of you might know that from Pudsey Bear, BBC Children in Need. That wasn't there when I was growing up, but was in a family who lived on a council estate. My father worked for West Yorkshire Foundries, and my mother did all sorts of sort of jobs, just work that fitted around family. And it was really, I think, the challenge that my parents faced in the 70s when my father was made redundant from West Yorkshire Foundries, and they had to make a big change in their lives. And I think that all of that has meant that I've thought about taking opportunities. So none of my family have been to university, and I was the first to go. And there were particular things along the way that encouraged me both to think about it, but then I often reflect on that huge opportunity that was afforded by going away, having an education, and then all of the things that it's opened up for me.
Did you have a clue what a university was or university life was like? Because you didn't have, and I didn't have, anybody that I could talk to that I knew who'd been to university, except some teachers at school.
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't think, and I sometimes do that. I don't think I knew anybody who'd actually gone to university. It really was teachers at school that encouraged me to think about it. But things so I went to a school, having moved from a big comprehensive just outside Leeds. My parents moved after my father was made redundant to the Yorkshire Dales. To set up on his own, to set up a business that was just literally, gardening, painting, decorating, anything he could do. Fortunately, a connection around a family friend meant that they had a place to stay. And it was very much, the school I went to after that was a school where you would normally take an 11 plus and go to, I think we still have it here in Kent, go to a grammar school or what was termed then the secondary modern. And I didn't do the 11 plus. It wasn't, my parents didn't know anything about it. I just went to the local school, which happened to be the secondary modern. But I had a fantastic science teacher there, and I will never forget him, Trevor Hargreaves. And this is the real power, I think, of what a teacher can do, in that he encouraged me to take separate O-levels for physics and chemistry. And the majority of students at that school did what was referred to as physical sciences. And it was that encouragement that then, as I left that school and went to FE College to do my A-levels, meant that I felt that I could do other things. I was encouraged at FE College, really, to think about university. I wanted to do nursing. I originally wanted to be a PE teacher. And then work experience meant that that career was opened up to me, and I very much benefited from people saying, well, if you want to do nursing, you can also go to university.
What, was that, I mean, did you just want to go to nursing and hadn't really thought about how you would get there? I just wondered where university fits in or fitted in for you in that.
So I think it was, well, it was partly, I mean, you were with friends who were starting to talk about it. So it was really thinking, well, actually, I could go. And it really was the teachers encouraging me to think about it. It wasn't that, you know, I don't think it was until I was probably in my sort of O-level years that I started thinking about it. It wasn't really then until I was making choices about what I wanted to do that this was an opportunity that was opened up. I didn't really know where I was applying even. I mean, I look back and think it's you know, such a serendipitous opportunity that I ended up at King's College London, and turns out to be, you know, a great university. But I was choosing in the dark, really. And I remember when I got there, in the hall of residence, you're sort of meeting lots of other students there, and they were saying, well, I'm doing X and I'm doing Y. I was thinking, well, why didn't anybody tell me that you could do all these fantastic things? You know, and you suddenly realise that actually you need people who can tell you, who can advise you, who can help you think about what else might be out there for you.
And also, do you notice, I mean, I'm kind of skipping ahead now, but when you talk to students, sometimes they think you got where you are because you had this master plan at 14 or 16 or 18. But most people are not like that, actually. Very few people are like that. So it's kind of okay to blunder around a bit.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I did not, at the age of 14, 15, think when I grow up I want to be a Vice-Chancellor. I didn't even know what it was. So no, as I say, I wanted to be a PE teacher, and then I realised...
There's still a chance,
There's still a chance I could be a PE. I was pretty good at hockey. And then I... loved biology, absolutely loved biology, and decided I wanted to do something in a laboratory in pathology or histology, something like that. So I did a week's work experience at the local hospital, and I was in the bowels of the hospital in the laboratories, and one of the members in the lab said, well, you know, we need to go to collect some blood. They were a phlebotomist. Come up with me onto the wards. And I went onto the wards, and I just thought, oh, wow, this is where I want to be. I want to be where people are. I want to be thinking about how we enable them to get better, to think about, you know, what's happening with them, how do their bodies work, how are their minds working, how can we, you know, intervene here to make a difference.
Why did you then choose, you know, PhD, academic study, and so on? What was it that was attractive about that, when there are all kinds of other routes you could have gone?
Yeah. So I did go to university and do a nursing degree. I absolutely loved it. And I think it was during that time that I was inspired by my lecturers and professors. And I remember thinking, if I could actually come back and do something like they're doing, that would be fantastic. But first of all, I need to go and practice as a nurse. So I did that. I specialised in cancer care and then later community health care. So I was a registered nurse and a district nurse, and I worked in acute oncology settings and community and people's homes. And it was very much part of that experience was raising lots of questions for me. Why were people reacting in the way they were reacting to particular things? I was very interested in issues around choice and decision making, informed consent. I work in an area of cancer where often people are having to make real choices about the kinds of treatment that they have. And I was very interested in how new treatments were developed and tested and how people took part in those clinical trials. So that sort of stayed with me. And then as I progressed through my clinical work, I thought, actually, you know what? I'm intellectually hungry. I want to do some more. I want to go back and do a PhD. And ended up at the University of Nottingham. And it was absolutely fantastic.
Now, I'm tempted to say now, how do you make the transfer from that to running a massive business with 20,000 students, vast numbers of employees, all kinds of stakeholders, or whatever the phrase is? How do you do that? Because it's not that, again, it's not an obvious, necessarily obvious career path.
No, and again, when I was doing my PhD, I think I did, again, Vice-Chancellor was not on the horizon. I think it was very much, for me, I absolutely loved being in universities. And whilst, of course, I love nursing and healthcare and all of that, for me, I felt like a round peg in a round hole when I sat in the library and thought, I have a fellowship, I am being paid to be here to do something that I love. So first of all, it was the research. As I went through my PhD, I had fantastic opportunities to travel and go spend time elsewhere. And I remember thinking, wow, you can have this fantastic career. You can have great colleagues, you can do great things in terms of thinking about the way the world works and how people interact within it, but you can teach. And so it was really very much confirming for me I wanted an academic career. But then very quickly, I ended up getting involved in leadership. So I got my first lectureship in 1999, but I was promoted to a professor in 2002. I mean, it was pretty dramatic. And whilst I'm not, I was promoted on potential, I happened to be in the right place at the right time, an expanding sector, particularly in nursing, midwifery and healthcare, people looking for academic leadership in universities. So I had these amazing opportunities. But as part of that, I was then asked to take on the leadership of the School of Nursing and Midwifery at the University of Nottingham for 6 weeks. And that turned into a year. And then I was asked to take on the full role. And it was really interesting. I was pregnant with my second child at the time. And I remember being approached about taking on the role. And I'm saying, well, I'm pregnant, I need to... And they said, well, that's fine, have the baby come back. And I thought, well, okay then, why not? So it was really, I think, just opportunities coming up, taking them, people having faith in you and trust in you that you can do these things, and then you have to live up to it. So I think for me, it was taking on that leadership role in the School of Nursing at the University of Nottingham. It was doing that role for a period of time and then becoming aware, of course, of the broader university and realising you are part of a fantastic sector. It is, as we've talked about, it's a sector that absolutely transforms lives, whether that's through the education we offer or the research that we do. And I wanted to be part of that. And I really enjoyed thinking about how it worked as a business. But a business that's all about the social and intellectual and creative activity that goes on here.
There's a kind of paradox, though, isn't there, that the university sector is among the most trusted institutions in our country, and at the same time, certainly in my lifetime, I cannot think of a time when we've not been more under siege or having difficulties for all kinds of reasons. I mean, most recently, what are we teaching about Europe, which we might get onto in a moment. If there's anybody who wants to know, you can apply to the university and come to lectures. But I mean, that's true, isn't it? It's a place full of opportunities, but it's also under siege in different ways, like all other big institutions in our country.
No, absolutely. I think to use the often said phrase, we live in interesting times in the university sector. And I think that whether it's thinking about how we fund the sector, what the sector does, how it's regulated, all of those things are coming to coalesce right upon us now. And I think in various meetings, colleagues who are here will have heard me describe it as we now have the eye of Sauron upon us. For good and more challenging times, I think, are kind of round the corner. And we have to, I think, be really clear about what is the role and purpose of universities and what does that look like in the 21st century, because it's very different to when many of our universities were founded. And we do have to now think about who we are, what we do and how we do it.
I'm obviously going to throw open to questions in a minute, but just maybe I could pursue that a bit. So how do you see universities fitting in? I mean, it's a great opportunity for many people, but I take it you don't believe everybody should go to university. They should have the opportunity to go, but not everybody is suitable to come to university.
I think,
is that right?
For me, I think everybody should have access and the opportunity to go. But I would not say that if you don't go to university, you've somehow failed or missed out. For me, I think we need to be paying much more attention to the different routes out of school and the different choices that young people can make. Universities can be accessed at any time. That's what's absolutely wonderful about them. They're here for if you're 18, 28, 38, 58, 98, you can always come here. But I think it's absolutely important that we really provide proper opportunities for young people to be able to access work and access careers through very different routes, and it's not all about universities.
Where do you see within that the University of Kent? I mean, what are our unique selling points, or what are the things that you think we can build on and perhaps change a bit in the future?
Yeah. So when I first arrived here, one of the things I was really struck by is the fact that everywhere you look, you've got this strapline, the UK's European University. And it was one of the things that really attracted me to the organisation. And it's not that it says European, but that it signals we are outward looking and we are inclusive. And I think they're really important things that universities do, but they're also really important values that I hold very dear. So there's I suppose the things that make Kent distinctive are genuinely feel the inclusivity and the outward looking. I love the fact it was one of the universities that was developed and founded in the 1960s. It has that kind of youth and energy about it. It is a young university. It's still only 50 odd years old, which is young. And it doesn't have the baggage of the past. And it was founded on principles around wanting to do things differently. And I think that still continues. And I'd like to see us thinking about and doing more things differently as we think about what the University of Kent is in the 21st century.
Does that present us with the obvious problem that in a post-Brexit Britain or whatever we're going into now, there are those, certainly when I travel around Europe, people say, do you British not really like us anymore? Are we not welcome? And we have a very, very large academic community with roots in different European Union countries, not to mention the students who roots there. So that's something very important to us. Is this a problem?
Well, we're not leaving Europe. So I think we need to be really clear that we are absolutely open, inclusive and welcoming. We want to attract and retain the very best staff wherever they come from, and attract and retain the very best students. And I think we do that in ways that we have centres in Europe where we have a physical presence, and I want to work with colleagues to develop and expand those. We recruit internationally and will continue to do that. And it's really, really important that we keep those really strong relationships that we've got across Europe and the world to be signalling this is what we're about. Knowledge does not stop at borders, and universities are about knowledge generation, and that needs to absolutely be clear and continue.
So the University of Kent is going to have its own foreign policy from now on?
If only.
Well, maybe that's an idea. I mean, we could build on that. And more sort of bread and butter things. We can talk about the money coming in through students and so on in a minute. But spending a limited amount of money, where should we spend it? I mean, do you have sort of thoughts as to where the priorities should be, where universities should be expanding and where they shouldn't be expanding?
So I very much feel that we have to think about the priorities around the kind of education that we're offering and the research that we're doing. And I think each institution has to build on its strengths. I think there will be, of course, things that look very similar across different universities. But I think increasingly universities will be playing to their strengths. And for us here, I think we've got great opportunities around particularly the life and the health sciences. But that very much draws on the strong base that we already have in the humanities and the social sciences, and showing how those things all interconnect. I think we offer a great student experience here. I think whether you look at our campuses in Canterbury or in Medway, they are really distinctive. And I think our geography is distinctive as well. So I think it's those opportunities that universities take to not just be the same as everybody else, but to try and think about what are the things that is the DNA of their place, And one of the things I think that the university is doing but could do more of is think about the role that it plays in the region, and be absolutely clear about how we are open to discussion, collaboration, networking, but supporting the activity that's going on in this region as well. If the region is strong, that helps us, and if we're strong, that helps the region.
And as part of that, a key point, presumably, is to help people who have never thought their children would go to university to understand this is not the place on the hill. It may physically be on a hill, but it really is not some kind of place on a hill that we want people to come in and have a look at least. That's quite difficult because of the financial burden that some people face, though, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, and I think that there are a couple of things in your question. One is, how do you break down barriers around institutions that, whether we like it or not, are seen as elite institutions? There are many people who live very close to our campuses who have probably never, ever actually gone through, I mean, there is no gate on the Canterbury campus, is there? But they've never actually gone onto the campus because they feel it's not for them. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have is, how do we break down those barriers so that people feel that this is a place for them, whether they're wanting to come here or simply wanting to use the facilities. Your other point about the financial burden is, I think that we really have to have conversations much earlier on with young people about what it means in terms of funding a university education and how that works. Now, whether we like it or not, we have a system where you actually do not pay your fees back until you are earning a certain amount. It does not affect your credit rating. There are ways that you will not pay it back if you are not earning a certain amount, and the loan is paid off. I think the biggest challenge we've got, and some of the government has moved on some things, but is for students from poorer backgrounds actually having access to proper maintenance grants. So it's not necessarily the fees, but it's actually the day-to-day living costs, which if you spoke to most students, they would say they're the things that they worry about the most.
But there's a couple of bits to that too, isn't there? One is universities, we all hope, will continue to be funded. They play a very important part, and they make the country richer. Just as the private sector makes the country richer, having smart people working in jobs makes the country richer. But to some of the people in Pudsey now, or some of the people in Clydebank where I come from now, it looks quite terrifying to go to an institution that they have no family knowledge of and to get into debt to do so. However we fund the universities, that is quite terrifying, isn't it? And you and your family might not have bitten at that opportunity faced with those same hurdles.
Yes, and I can't say what I would have done because I wasn't in that position. But I think that one of the really interesting things is, actually, if you look at the evidence, there are more and more young people from low participation backgrounds or low income backgrounds actually coming to university. So how do we keep that momentum? How do we work with our widening participation teams? How do we get into schools and colleges earlier to really make a difference to the choices that young people make? But you are absolutely right, there are still some really, really hard to reach groups.
One of the things that really struck me is talking to many students here and some elsewhere is they say, I'll never pay it back anyway because I will never earn that much. There's a slightly pessimistic view actually of what their future is, but it is quite a burden in that sense too, particularly the interest rate.
Yes, absolutely. And I think part of the if we can turn this into the current politicisation of universities is very much driven by the shift in the funding regime. And I think that we do have to get into a debate about how do we fund universities. And we've had it, and we're back in it. Education is not free. We all pay for it somehow. Taxation means that it feels free because we're not paying it at the point of access. But it's still something that has to be paid for. And we have to decide as a society how we pay for it. And if you look at surveys, higher education comes very, very low down. Schools, health comes much higher up. And yet more and more people actually want to access higher education. We've got more people than ever wanting some of this. It's fantastic. So if we're not prepared as a country to pay for it through taxation, then we have to think of other ways of funding it. And that's where the fees system came.
Right. On that happy note, we've got microphones as usual. Now, I know there's lots of people with lots of questions. Who'd like to start us off?
You've heard the story. We came in a sea of nothing and started something. A number of us, the first 500 are here tonight. Two reasons. One, we see our relationship with the university as unfinished business, and we've been actively involved in it over the past 50 years. Secondly, we actually feel that we are part of the university. So firstly, as often the self-appointed spokesman of the first 500, I'd like to take the opportunity from us of welcoming you
Thank you.
To what we think is a really important job, and wish you well.
Thank you.
But to say also that now there are something in the order of 200,000 alumni out there, a lot of whom have got a lot of things to offer, not money, but other things to the university. So I guess since this is supposed to be a question, I guess I should ask you, how do you see the role of the alumni and the university over the next 50 years?
Yeah, good question. And the first 500 is a fabulous story, and I understand there's lots of mud around when you all first arrived, but it just, I mean, I think you've just articulated the really important point about actually when you join a university, actually you join it for life, and the experience that you have and the education that you have stays with you. And often it's not until you're further through your life that you look back and think, actually, you know what, that was a really, really important time in my life, and it becomes even more meaningful. So I think you're absolutely right. We've got a huge network out there of people who are real ambassadors for this university. So I would be looking for, from our alumni, first of all, to be great ambassadors for this university, to talk about the university, to promote the university, and to raise its profile and reputation. The next is to give us your time and your experience and share your networks. We have current students, new graduates who are looking for people to help them, to mentor them, support them. And I know many people do that already, but the more people that can do that around the world, our alumni are all around the world, then isn't that a fantastic network for our new graduates to enter into? And then yes, finally, those who can give, please give, because it helps us do things that we wouldn't be able to do. And you see things like the Gulbenkian, you see things like the Collier Ferguson, you see things like the Wigader Law Clinic. And they're all fantastic things that we all benefit from, and future generations will benefit from as well. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to meeting other people from our alumni community over the next few hours, but also weeks, months and years.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman at the front.
Thank you. Vice-Chancellor, you said that everybody should have access to university. And at the end you were talking about the choices we have to make. But no one has really ever faced the financial problem of saying everybody should go to university and how it should be paid for. The cost is horrendously high, and if you ask people, would you be prepared to pay another 10 pence on the income tax so that everyone goes to university, I think you'd find they say no. And so we have choices to make, really. If you say everyone should go, then the country has either got to pay an awful lot of money, or else the students have got to pay an awful lot of money. And you have to face the other problems that if everybody goes to university in the way in which they normally go to primary school and secondary school and so forth, then having a BA, like in America, will become really rather trivial. And you're going to have master's degrees or something like that for virtually every profession. And that's very expensive too. And I don't think, as a country, we are ready for that. And so you may have to say, well, perhaps we need to restrict entry to universities. And to say, well, the people who go there have got certain functions to perform. unfortunately, or you say, well, everyone should have a wonderful general education, and then you have to pay for it.
Okay, so I said everybody should have the opportunity of access to university, not that everybody should go. So there will be many, many, many people for whom university is not right for them. And we need alternative ways out of school and into work. I think, though, that really what struck me about the expansion of higher education in this country in particular is that as soon as we took the cap off numbers, more and more and more people applied and more people want to go. And I think that's a really strong signal that, well, we must be getting something right. There must be something about wanting to come to university and get a degree or whatever programme or qualification people are getting. And I wouldn't wish to restrict that to particular parts of society or particular parts of a workforce. I think the skills, the level of kind of knowledge that people require is shifting and changing all the time in terms of access to different sorts of careers. And I think what we're trying to do is make sure, yes, that people have a great time while they're at university and develop as individuals, but they're also prepared for a world where actually work is changing and we need to enable them to change with that. I don't know if any of you have come across The 100-Year Life. Linda Grattan, and I've forgotten the other author, but at London Business School, a psychologist and an economist, talking about the fact that we are all going to be living much longer lives, and we are all going to be working longer because there's no pensions left, but we have to think about, can we sustain this level of work, these kinds of careers, for 40, 50, 60, 70 years? Or do we have to think differently about work and give ourselves different tools in our kit? And I think that's what universities can do. And so I want as many people as possible to experience what I've experienced. It's absolutely fantastic. Why should it only be a certain few people who have the opportunity to come to university? And then we have to think about, what do we as a society need from our graduates, from our future workforce, and make that work for us. But also we've got to think collectively about the kinds of working lives that we have. And we are all living longer and we will be working longer. So yes, I absolutely hear what you're saying about the cost of all of that. But I think it's something that is really worth paying.
I was talking to somebody recently connected to the university sector, nothing to do with this university, who said there's a great opportunity here which British universities have not yet seized, which is lifelong learning. We talk about it, there's a phrase, 100-year life, talk about that too. But if we recognise that the great dislocation which is going to come upon us because of artificial intelligence and so on, how are we preparing to train people for a new future? How are we prepared to give them new skills or even just have a bit of fun at age 40 or 50 or 60 or as you say? So we sort of talk about, we universities talk about it, but we're not doing enough.
I would absolutely agree with you. And I think that universities have to rethink what they do. Is it, as we are now, the traditional 3-year undergraduate degree, the master's programme, the PhD? Or is it, yes, of course, some of that, is it being able to come back into university easily and flexibly? Is it thinking about opportunities for learning in a workplace rather than coming into a university? How do we manage things digitally and online? I think there will always, and there was a developments a few years ago that MOOCs, so massive open online courses, were going to get rid of universities because everybody would just register for a degree online and there'd be no need for bricks and mortar anymore. It'd all be from bricks to clicks was the phrase. But actually, people want to come to a place as well. And learning is a social activity. So it's about creating both the physical learning environments where people can come, can develop, can grow, can learn, but also thinking about how we might be able to engage as well in digital ways and online in a much more blended way. But I think it's a real challenge. I think it's something at the University of Kent I really want us to be thinking about. How do we move away from traditional ways of providing our education to thinking much more creatively? And we do it in pockets, and there are some really fantastic examples. But we need to really mainstream that.
And that is something the alumni community could also help
absolutely.
with, because of various ages, various life experiences.
And there'll be people working in these areas that can actually bring things back into the university that we could really benefit from.
Some more thoughts? Yes, a couple of people there and a lady there. And maybe I'm not ignoring you, but I'm just trying not to turn the kilt too much for reasons which I won't explain.
Vice-Chancellor, you referred briefly to the relationship between the university and the local region. I wonder if you could just say a little about the relationship with the local community, not so much other local institutions, but just local residents who are your immediate neighbours. As a member of a local residents association, can I add our welcome on behalf of our association, and just say that we were very encouraged by some of the things you said immediately after you arrived here about the need to address the concerns of local residents. I just wonder what's come across to you so far as to what you think those concerns are and what you think perhaps needs doing in the way of addressing local people's concerns and attitudes towards the university.
Okay, thank you. So the university is absolutely part of the city, and we have to be good neighbours. And when I've been talking with our students, our staff, and our neighbours, I get a real sense that we all feel we are part of this community, even though, absolutely, some of our students come for a time and then go away again. But we want them to feel part of the community while they're here. We also want them to recognise their responsibilities while they're here, and that it's important that they are living in a community and need to behave responsibly as part of that community. And I know some of the concerns that have been coming from our neighbours have been very much about those issues, about the fact that the city feels there are large numbers of students. That can bring huge benefits, but it does absolutely bring challenges. I absolutely recognise the issues that have been raised with me around noise, around litter, around the kind of sense of the city feeling overwhelmed at times. I think, though, that the main thing is to make sure that we're all listening to each other and that we're having good conversations about this. I think I came to a residents group a few weeks ago where actually, I was able to start talking with people face to face. It makes such a difference. To actually say, I hear what you're saying, these are some of the things we're doing, how can we work together? How can we work together to talk with the City Council about particular issues? Our students want to live in a safe, litter-free, noise-free environment as well. So absolutely we need to make sure we each understand our responsibilities. We make that really clear, and then we support each other in making sure that happens. But good communication and face-to-face communication, I think, is the way that works. And again, I'm really very much wanting to encourage people to use and see the university as it's a public benefit, it's a public asset. And so how do we make sure that people are able to access our facilities, whether it's coming to the theatre, using a cafe, using the library, using a room, or simply walking around the beautiful grounds, or being at the Medway campus and similarly being able to use those facilities. So they're the kinds of things I'm wanting to work on. I think there's good relationships actually and good foundations to build on. But it is about good communication.
Thank you. Who's else got a microphone there? And then there's someone there. Yep, and a couple over there too. Oh, and a lady at the back.
Thank you, Councillor Rosemary Doyle, someone who took advantage of your lifelong learning programme here and did a degree as a mature student. And I'm forever grateful for that opportunity. I wondered, you said when you were a student you discovered all these different subjects out there that you hadn't heard of. Are there any subjects that you now feel have outlived their usefulness as university subjects?
I should be careful what I say.
Or are there others that you feel should be studied at a higher level these days?
And the cameras are rolling. Whatever you say now, you're doomed.
I don't think there are particular subjects that have kind of outlived their rightful place in universities. I think it's more that subjects evolve, knowledge evolves, disciplines develop, change. The way we talk about things changes. What I really love about universities is that you've got in one place people who are experts in everything from the humanities, the social sciences, engineering and science. And it's actually when they come together to solve genuine problems that I think is what make universities an absolutely fantastic and pretty unique place. So one of the things I've been talking with my colleagues about is how do we bring that to life? So we have our own academic discourse in our disciplines, and we can happily sit and chat to each other in our own language. But really, one of the things about making universities relevant and our role in absolutely explaining and describing what we do is that we have to turn that into something that makes sense. So we do fantastic work here in our computer sciences, working with people who are psychologists, who are lawyers, who actually start working on issues around cybersecurity. Now, if we just looked at the papers they wrote or the grants that they write, we wouldn't understand that. But if we say at the University of Kent, we do research that keeps you safe online, that's much more meaningful. So it's really about how do we start to think about engaging and communicating the work of the university in a way that we can all understand.
Thank you. A couple of... Yes, sir.
Vice-Chancellor, arguably the biggest local issue is the future of our hospital and indeed the future of health services across Kent. Given your background, can you give us a glimmer of hope, perhaps for medical school or anything else? Thank you.
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question, and you may well have picked this up anyway, but we did today submit a collaborative bid with Canterbury Christ Church University for 100 funded places to create a medical school here in the county of Kent. Now, that is a hugely competitive process. There are no guarantees, but we are really, really excited by that prospect. I think it would be great for the county and right for the county, and I think it would be great for the university and right for the university. So we still have a long way to go. We won't know the outcome of that in terms of the funded places until March. But what it has done, I think, is very much galvanised us and our partners in the NHS, but also local MPs, to very much get behind this bid. So I was really proud today when we submitted that bid. It was a genuinely collaborative piece of work with genuine support from across the county. And please, everybody, keep your fingers crossed. And if you can find £22 million for capital funding, that would be great. You find and the donations in a bucket outside, I think.
Yes, right at the back, and then we've got a lady at the back over there too.
Hi, Professor Cox. Thank you for being here today. So I'm an MSc student, computer science MSc student, but I also have an arts background, and I run the Zen Society here on campus.
The Zen Society?
The Zen Society.
Wow.
Lots of meditation. So you were talking about how we can possibly explore new solutions to these, problems of, on the one hand, the fact that, we call ourselves the European university, and yet there's this growing anti, sentiment against our, European brothers and sisters. Just recently, the Debating Society held the is alt-right a movement now? A debate. Yeah. And so one of the things that we try to do in Zen is, practice spirituality without dogma. And, Canterbury was once the spiritual center of, Europe. And, you were talking earlier about the fact that we have this unique geographical position, right? And how to kind of, harness the goodness of that in such a way. So I was wondering if you'd be open to kind of collaborating with us students, to create a more harmonious and culture here on campus. That's one aspect of my question. The other was in regards to your funding. So my friends and I, we've built this algorithm that trades bitcoins.
That's the answer. Bitcoins.
Yeah, and
if this is a sales pitch or an
no, it's not. It's an idea. It's an idea based on cryptocurrencies. So you were talking about how we can gain more, more funding. Well, look, money at the end of the day is just like inches, you know, like to say we don't have enough money is to say like, oh, we don't have enough inches. This, you know, like it doesn't make much sense. It's a man-made creation. So it's all about accessing value or like one another's value. For example, if you tomorrow there was a currency released here on Kent campus called Kent One, I don't know, you know, and then, you know, we did trading and that currency gained in value and people worked together. Who knows? Like you could create alternative sources of income and also.
Okay. I'm sorry. We're going to have to move on to other people. Do you have anything? Okay.
No, just those two ideas. Thanks so much.
To answer your first question, then absolutely very, very happy to be working with students to think about how we work together, how we create an inclusive culture. I was at an event on, was it Tuesday, April? Trying to remember when it was, Tuesday, with a group of students where we were talking about a whole range of things across the student experience. And they were fantastic. They were engaged, they were sharing what worked and what didn't work. I want to do much, much more of that.
Bitcoin, not so much.
Bitcoin, not so much.
Right, okay. When you can spend it at the Old Beverley, I'll be really interested.
Yeah. When you can go to Sainsbury's, then fine.
Yes.
I hope you don't mind. I want to ask you a sociological and philosophical
Oh, no.
relating to your former life. Why are we so afraid of death? And I don't mean that as a concept, I'm going to die as a person, but as a society. Why?
Why are we so afraid of death as a society? Death is something that we don't talk about. Death is something that we actually don't see very often. How many people have actually seen a dead person? Oh, okay, fine. I'm talking to the wrong group. Well, that's great, because actually, if you say that to many audiences, many people will not put their hand up. But we've all experienced somebody who's died and lost a loved one. And yeah, it's very difficult. It is difficult to talk about because it's an existential crisis. The whole sort of challenge to who you are and what life has meant to be either facing death or as an individual or seeing somebody facing death is a really difficult thing and almost a taboo thing to talk about. Now, I do think it's actually got easier to talk about those things as more and more people have talked about their personal stories. But it's still something that, you know, is sort of kept away. People die mostly in hospitals, and it's kind of very much a medicalised and clinical event as opposed to part of our normal lives. So yes, it is difficult for people to talk about. But you've all seen and witnessed it.
But your work involved people also taking choices about how to face it, didn't it? So you thought perhaps the most difficult thing.
So both my clinical work and then the research that I did was, so I worked in a cancer centre where we were running a lot of clinical trials. So when you're testing particularly chemotherapies, they have to at some point move from the laboratory to be tested for the very first time in human beings. And in the cancer setting, because these drugs are cytotoxic, i.e. they kill cells, you cannot do the normal thing when you're testing a drug, which is try it in healthy volunteers. Some of you may have taken part in various drug trials, but in cancer that's not possible. So what you have to do is use a population of people for whom there is no standard treatment for their illness, or they have failed on standard treatment. And so they are offered what's referred to as a phase 1 clinical trial, which is often the first time that that drug may have been tested in a human setting. So how do you decide whether to take part or not? You are incredibly vulnerable. You've been told there's nothing more that can be done for you. You are sitting in front of possibly a consultant that's been looking after you, and you're offered the opportunity to take part in an experiment that may or may not help you, but it may help somebody in the future. So I was absolutely sort of struck by the decisions that people had to make at probably one of the most vulnerable times in their lives, and often why people did that because, yes, it might just be the miracle they were looking for, but they wanted to help others as well. So I got interested on the clinical side and then was able to take that through into research, because one of the things that wasn't really talked about when I was doing my work in the mid-90s was about issues around informed consent and recruitment in these particular settings. So I was doing a piece of work that was very much about looking at how do we think about things in relation to recruitment, informed consent, human experimentation and quality of life. It was fascinating.
I think we've got time for, yes, Sir Robert down here, and the lady up there.
Thank you. I'd like to ask 2 questions. One is about community engagement. You talk about engaging the local community. Has the university, or would the university think about engaging impressionable kids who are gifted and talented in the local schools, with either lessons or whatever we have to offer here at the university? And the second question is about mature students.
Yes, Christina.
We have a lot of mature students in this university, and I'm talking 40 plus, all the way up to something plus, who don't feel very included in the community, in anything at the university, yet they have a huge wealth of experience and knowledge. And how do you tap into this as you're tapping into alumni while it is still here?
Yeah, okay, great questions. So the first one, I would hope and like to think that we're doing a lot of that work already in local schools through our widening participation and access teams. But there is always more for us to do. So I absolutely take on board what you're saying about working with children and young people who may not, as Gavin's already been talking about, be thinking about or think that university is for them. On your second point about mature students, I think a mature student's classed as somebody over 21, which always seems slightly odd to me. And I think we shouldn't be talking about mature students or your students. So I think there's something about universities are very much set up, as I said, on the traditional 3-year undergraduate coming in from A-levels, 18-year-old student. But actually we know that students do not all fall into that category. I think, though, that we've had these conversations before, you're raising some really important issues about how do we cater for the variety of needs that people have who are coming to our campuses. How do we make sure that their experience is what they're looking for and they get from us what they need? But also that we make use of people who come from different backgrounds and come to us at different times in their lives. And I think one of the things we need to start thinking about is different ways of mentoring, peer mentoring and supporting each other. And actually I think it can work both ways, whether you're younger, older, whatever. So yes, we'll carry on the conversation, Christy.
Mr. Rob.
A quick question. What do you see as the role of a chancellor?
Role of the Chancellor?
You can both answer if you wish, but it's the Vice-Chancellor's job to figure that out.
Yeah, no. Well, I think for me, a Chancellor of a university is the ultimate ambassador. They are a figure that we look up to. They're a figure that we respect. They're a figure that goes out and promotes this university. They bring knowledge, skills, experience to the university. It's great that we have a Chancellor who gives of his time. Gavin has done a number of graduations for us, continues to do preside at graduations for us, but also host events like this. But you talk about the university, you support us, you support students. That's what I'm looking for a Chancellor. And wise counsel as well.
Well, two out of 3 is not so bad. Just a final thought, because we're all going to go to dinner now in a minute. But just one thing which came through, you touched on a couple of times, is this question of expertise, experts, people from different fields getting together and so on. But we also live in a time when expertise has never been so devalued and distrusted. And when you present people with the facts, some people refuse some people in quite high offices, actually.
I can't imagine who you're talking about.
I've heard. But expertise, and this is a room full of people who have expertise.
Yeah.
This university is full of people with expertise, and people leave here with even more expertise. How do we insist that expertise is not being talked down to, it's actually going to people who might know something?
I think exactly that. We have to say there are people in this world who know things. We all have different expertise, and we just have to keep going. We can't. I think if we throw away knowledge, if we throw away evidence, then really, I just think that we should pack our bags and go home. I recognise that we live in a world of 24-hour news, social media, fake news. People sometimes don't like the things they hear. But actually, I think we have to engage with that. How do we get involved? How do we think about what we're doing on social media? How do we think about actually talking about what we do in different ways? I think part of the challenge around experts is that there are these barriers that make it look elite. And I think if you think something's elite and you can't access it, then why should you believe it? And why should you get engaged with it? So I think that rather than saying those people have to come to us, the experts, actually, we have to get out there and start talking about what we do and why, and celebrate it as well. I think there's a huge amount of. We talked earlier about the challenges that universities are facing and the sector is facing. All of us know somebody who's been to university. All of us in this room have some connection with this university. There are more and more and more people who've experienced university. The majority of them have had a fantastic time. So why are we not out there saying what's good about the UK's higher education system? Yeah, there are things we need to fix, but let's start talking about it, celebrating it, and then fixing the stuff that we need to fix.
Well, there's a call to arms. Thank you all very much. I'd just like to say I think we have got a great Vice-Chancellor. Thank you.